So we're going to start with number 10, which is Rangers' Ryan Kent. Obviously arrived in the summer after, I think it's fair to say, a successful campaign last year with Rangers. There was a lot of kind of demand for him to come back, but Liverpool were wanting a big sum, and in the end, very late on in the window, Rangers provided said big sum and paid £7 million for him. I guess first of all, he's on this list because he's obviously got a lot of potential and ability. Do you think number 10 is about the right number for him?
I think so. Ryan Kent's a really interesting one for me because last season I thought he looked really impressive for Rangers as this player on loan, and I think it was clear to see why Liverpool did kind of rate him. I mean, I don't think at no point did I ever think he looked like a youngster who was going to break into that really, really outstanding Liverpool team. And to be fair to Kent, that's not really any sort of disparaging comment on his own talent. In terms of Liverpool, we're talking about a team with maybe the three best attacking players in the world. So it's no insult to say that it never struck me that he was going to go on to be a full-time Liverpool player. But at Rangers, I thought had a really great season. He won Young Player of the Year. Personally, he wouldn't have been my choice, I think, but by no means did I think he was undeserving of it. And he obviously after that was a player that Rangers fans were desperate to try and sign in the summer. And I genuinely think that what they've got in Kent is a player who does seem to have a lot in his locker. His stats haven't been great this season, but at the same time, he's still shown plenty of times throughout the campaign that he can shine on really big stages. In Europa League in particular, he got that goal against Braga, which won the tie for them in the second leg, if I'm not mistaken. He picked up really important assists in draws against Feyenoord and Young Boys at the end of the group stages. And he obviously has picked up goals against Celtic and Hibs. And these aren't kind of blips at all. He kind of showed this kind of real desire to shine on the highest stages last season as well. It wouldn't surprise me if he's kind of came to Scottish football thinking, he's desperate to really show what he can do in the big games. And I think actually for the most part he's done really well. He's not the most consistent goal scorer or creator of assists in the division. And I think that's something he really could add to his game. He's fifth. He was fifth this season for Rangers in terms of their goal scoring, and he's actually 10th in the league for key passes, which actually surprised me because his assists numbers aren't great. But I think in the long term, he's a player that they could really look to as a kind of consistent provider of goals on either wing to kind of help, Alfredo Morelos going forward. Because I mean, this season they've obviously got Scott Arfield and Jermaine Defoe, but in the long term, now those guys are really going to be there to help Gerrard kind of build a squad, to be honest with you. So I think, right now Kent is a player with a lot of potential. He's shown in probably Rangers' toughest games this season that he can be, a proper, almost like a match winner for them. And going forward, there's a lot of room for him to grow into at Rangers.
I mean, you kind of mentioned it there, Stefan. I'll throw over to you, James, about that word potential. I know we've spoken a lot about that in this list in terms of how the placings have worked out. It's not just on the player at the moment, it's also the kind of development they've still got to do and the potential they've got. With Kent, obviously, I think I think it's a fair statement to say there's definitely potential that he's still young. But for £7 million, do you think you really should be buying a player who's maybe nearing, not his peak, but certainly should be at least registering one assist in the league so far this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange one in terms of the amount of money that Rangers shelled out for him because, I mean, obviously the transfer market, you can't really ever say how much a player is genuinely worth, but I thought £7 million was a wee bit on the steep side. But having said that, if he, stays at Rangers for a few seasons, continues to develop and continues to get better, I mean, Rangers would certainly make a profit on that deal because, it wouldn't be long, surely, before a club in England, bought him for, say, I don't know, 10, 12 million if he continues to do well. Obviously, the big problem at the moment is his assists. Like you say, he's not registered a single league assist this season, which for a winger obviously isn't great. But I mean, he's undoubtedly a really talented player, and he's clearly got a lot of skill. I mean, he scored some wonderful goals. I mean, like you were saying, Stefan, the goal against Braga was great. The goal against Celtic as well, both this season and last season at Parkhead. Like, he's got a habit of popping up with big goals in big games. But having said that, I do think that domestically, in games where Rangers are sort of really under the cosh and struggling to get over the line, I'm not like. I think there was the game against Hamilton at New Douglas Park at the start of the season. He scored a late brace, and then Rangers won. But apart from that, he's not really provided that many sort of match-winning moments. And I mean, you look at something like, I don't know, say, I mean, I wrote a piece a while ago comparing Ryan Kent's record in big games to Christopher Julien's record. And, you know, obviously Julien's a centre-back, but, you know, he's provided more sort of match-winning moments, you know, in the final third than Ryan Kent has this season. And, you know, even Julien has 2 assists to his name this season, and he's a centre-half. So there's obviously, yeah, people want more from Kent. I think Rangers fans maybe expected a little bit too much from him, obviously because, you know, scoring goals against Celtic at Parkhead, you know, punching Scott Brown, these are things that are going to endear you to Rangers supporters, you know, and they're going to love you for it. And while he's undoubtedly got a lot of talent, he's still to truly deliver, I think, on the promise that he has shown. And I think, as I say, I think expectations were maybe a little bit too high for what he could actually bring to Rangers, but there's no doubt that he's got a lot of talent, and his main problem is he doesn't really seem to bode particularly well when players double up on him on the, you know, on the left wing. I think he can get a little bit constricted, and, you know, okay, that's good because it draws players into that area of the park, which frees up space elsewhere in the pitch for his teammates, but it does mean that he himself isn't contributing as much as he maybe would like to.
I know, again, this is maybe something we've talked about with other players, Stefan, but what James is saying there is it may be beneficial, this break, that he can maybe press the reset button and kind of look at that area where he's like, well, I need to get better if teams are going to put 2 players on me, they know exactly what I'm doing now. Do you think that that's maybe something that's going to be beneficial for him going into whenever football starts again in Scotland?
Yeah, I mean, I think he and Gerrard probably have to sit down and figure out why he's good at certain things and not good at other things. I mean, if you want to look at his goal scoring, it's clear to me that he really thrives when Rangers are either playing in Europe or against Celtic and suddenly go from being this team who park themselves on the opposition's 20-yard line and become a more kind of defensive counter-attacking team. He really, really looks so much better for Rangers when he has the ability to counter-attack. And in the games that James has correctly kind of pointed out, these matches against Hamilton or Kilmarnock and the likes, he doesn't really have that. Interesting as well, when you kind of look at the goals he scores for Rangers, that Hamilton game in particular, and I think there's been another 2 in the league this season, where he scores a lot of goals from outside the box, from quite central positions as well. And then, you know, I think maybe... I think the problem with Kent is that I do wonder if Gerrard's kind of trying to square a round peg here, where he looks at Kent as a wide player, but I think in truth he's actually an inside forward, or maybe even more so a number 10 to an extent. And he's also probably a number 10 or an inside forward who'd be much better in a counter-attacking side. And those 2 things aren't really things that he's going to be doing at Rangers that much. So I think James is spot on that next season, to really step up, Kent has to figure out, or Gerrard has to figure out, how does Ryan Kent, how does he become as effective in these games against Hamilton or Livingston as he is, as stupid as this sounds, against Braga or Celtic, because they have to figure out how to use him when there isn't space for him to run into.
Would you almost, James, prefer that problem that a player can do it against a Celtic, a Braga, and in the Europa League in these big games, but needs to be able to do it and when it's maybe a bit more like a low-lying line, or, as you say, players double up on him? Is it better for a coach to have someone with Kent's potential who can already do it in the big games rather than the small ones, rather than the other way around?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, the primary factor, as Stefan says, with why he plays better in these big games is because he's afforded more space to drive into, and that's what he's best at. But certainly, I mean, you know, that's how players do develop, like players in that position. Like, I mean, you look at somebody like, I don't know, like James Forrest, for instance. You know, when he first came for Celtic for years, he was sort of like a one-trick pony. You know, everyone knew exactly what he was going to do, and, you know, it's taken him a few years, particularly over the last 2 or 3 seasons. He's really changed his game and became a lot more, and he's found out ways to get past all these packed defences that everyone plays against Celtic. And, you know, that's always going to come with the territory for playing for. If you're playing for Rangers or Celtic, you're going to come up against packed defences, you know, in 80% of your fixtures or something like that. So yeah, he needs to figure out how to, you know, still be effective. That's something for him and Gerrard to figure out. But I think It's interesting what you're saying there about Stefan about him being a sort of number 10, because I think it was Gary McAllister was saying that he's been quite insistent that Rangers have been playing with two number 10s since the turn of the year, one being Hadji on the right and the other one being Kent on the left. Because obviously Kent's strengths do lie in that sort of, running at the opposition, cutting inside, and like you say, having a go from distance. I mean, if as I keep saying, they need to figure out how to develop and how to improve against pack defences, because right now that's his biggest problem. And if they can, get past that, which I'm sure they can, then there's no reason to think that Kent can't get significantly better when he's at Ibrox.
Anything to add to that, Stefan, before we move on to number 9?
No, I don't think so. I think we kind of hit the nail on the head. The only thing I was kind of debating in my head whether I should actually make this point, but it almost strikes me with Kent, he almost has to become more of an old-fashioned player, in the sense that, at the risk of sounding like your old dad here, he needs to kind of, for example, like I was a big fan of Candace at Rangers because he was just a very straightforward winger, and although that might not be the sexiest thing in the world, it got results for Rangers because he was just very good at getting the ball in the box. And I think one of the things that Kent really struggles with against these smaller teams is that his instinct is to cut inside and do something, and that's because he's been trained at one of the best youth academies in the country in England, and from the very early stage he's been trained to learn how to basically cut inside and create goals in a league that players are going to be coming up against him and creating, and he's going to have to try and figure out how to exploit quite a large amount of space behind a defence that are going to get in his face. In the Scottish Premiership, he has to basically learn how to do the opposite and has to start from scratch. And I do wonder if he'd be far more useful to Rangers in these kind of grudge games as against, for example, Livingston and or Motherwell, whoever else. If he could just make more of a habit of getting to the line and swinging the ball in for Morelos rather than cutting inside and trying to do something more intricate. But like I said, I do run the risk of sounding like your old dad when I say things like that.
Well, I thought Daniel Candace was very sexy, so there you go.